Rachel could barely stand on her feet as she stepped out of the cosmetics company building. The workday had drained her completely. More product inspections, testing new formulations, endless supplier meetings. All the responsibility fell on her shoulders, and she had long since grown used to that weight. She trudged toward the bus stop, automatically counting the days until her next paycheck. Her mind looped through the usual worries: mortgage, her daughter Emily, and Jason. Her husband, once a strong and cheerful man, now felt like a ghost of who he used to be. After losing his job due to medical issues, the entire family had fallen squarely on Rachel's back. At first, she truly believed it was temporary, that Jason would recover, find something else to do, some way to feel useful again. But year after year passed, and nothing changed. When she finally got home, she slowly climbed the stairs to their second-floor apartment and opened the door. Silence. As always, Jason was lying in the living room, eyes glued to the TV. "Hey," she called as she took off her coat. "Hey," he mumbled, not even looking her way. "Just another evening. Just like every evening." Rachel turned on the kettle and stood still for a moment. Once upon a time, Jason had been a different man. He'd never liked school and jumped straight into vocational training after high school. Became a bus driver. First worked local routes, then eventually got his interstate certification and started long hauls. He'd loved the open road, the shifting landscapes, new towns and places, but his body hadn't been able to keep up. Years of sitting, endless vibration, junk food, and chronic exhaustion took their toll. At 38, he landed in the hospital with crippling back pain. Then came the heart scare. Doctors urged him to change careers. He resisted. Eventually, Jason could barely move without pain. His mother, Lorraine, who had always held a high-ranking job in the local social services agency, pulled some strings and got him officially classified as disabled. Rachel accepted it as reality. She believed he really couldn't work. He complained he couldn't sit, stand, or even walk for long without intense pain. So Rachel shouldered everything: finances, meals, medicine, mortgage, everything. Lorraine had a steel-strong personality. Her life had been dedicated to her son, and now she expected Rachel to carry that mission forward. "You don't take good enough care of Jason," she'd say every time she visited. "He needs support. He needs to feel loved." Rachel didn't argue. Not out loud. But inside, the words burned. Support? She was working full-time, covering every bill, every need. Jason just laid there, complaining. But to his mother, none of that mattered. "You know how hard this is for him emotionally," Lorraine would continue. "You could at least cook him something nice for dinner once in a while, instead of these microwave dinners." Rachel clenched her teeth, as if she had time for homemade meals after working 10 hours and dealing with a teenager. After Jason got his disability papers, he gave up entirely. Didn't look for work. Didn't pursue remote options. The only thing he did consistently was take a short walk every afternoon because the doctor prescribed it. Then it was back to the couch and back to the TV. Rachel survived in a state of constant pressure. Every day she woke up early, went to work, then came home to handle dinner, homework, laundry, bills. A few years back, her boss, Mr. Thompson, brought up the annual company retreat. Once a year, their company sent top performers to wellness resorts. "You've earned it, Rachel," he said, handing her a list of spa destinations. "You should really take some time to recharge." She glanced at the brochure, but immediately handed it back. Vacation felt like a dream she wasn't allowed to have. Not while Jason needed her. But an idea struck her. "Could I give the spot to my husband instead?" she asked. Mr. Thompson raised an eyebrow, but agreed. Rachel explained Jason's medical condition and how the resort might help him recover. And so it began. Year after year, she signed her husband up for the retreat instead of going herself. He'd go away for a week or two, and deep down, Rachel hoped it would be a turning point, that he'd come back feeling better, ready to contribute again. But every time, the same thing happened. Jason returned grumpy, unimpressed. "The place was useless," he'd say. "Nothing helped. The doctors are clueless." And then he'd collapse back onto the couch and resume his routine of complaints and complete dependency. But Rachel kept hoping. Until one day, everything changed. One weekday afternoon, Rachel was called into Mr. Thompson's office. He looked unusually upbeat. "There's an opportunity one think you'll be perfect for," he said with a smile. "It's a 3-month assignment in Paris, training at one of our leading cosmetics partners. Paid housing, competitive salary. And here's the best part. Your daughter Emily can come with you. She can attend the American school at the embassy. Rachel listened, her heart thudding. It was the kind of opportunity most people only dreamed about. Paris, a global hub of beauty and fashion, real career growth, a fresh start. But alongside the excitement, a thick knot of anxiety formed in her chest. Jason, he couldn't manage without her. He didn't work, didn't cook, barely got to the store unless pushed. Who would take care of him? The answer was obvious. Rachel shook her head slowly. I can't, she said. And with that, the invisible weight on her shoulders grew even heavier. She had done the right thing, hadn't she? Then why did it feel like she'd just walked away from the only chance at something more? She left the office and paused at the window, staring out at the gray, cloud-smothered city. Somewhere out there was another life, other possibilities. But they weren't for her. Responsibility came first. Jason came first. She didn't have the right to dream. That evening, Rachel came home early. An unexpected lull at work gave her a rare afternoon off. She had just taken off her coat when Jason popped his head out from the living room. "There's a delivery guy downstairs," said he brought the headphones Emily ordered. Rachel nodded, and Jason surprised her by reaching for his jacket. "I'll go down and grab it," he said casually and headed out. Rachel walked into the kitchen. The sink was full of dirty dishes. Emily had rushed off to school that morning, and Jason had clearly eaten lunch but left everything where it was. Sighing, she turned on the faucet and grabbed a sponge. The water pressure was too strong, splashing everywhere. A few droplets landed on Jason's phone, which was lying on the counter by the sink. The screen lit up. A voice message flashed across the top. From Lorraine. Rachel hadn't meant to listen, but when her hand brushed the phone, it unlocked automatically. Jason had never set up a passcode. She froze as the message began playing. "Why are you in such a hurry? I still don't like this whole plan of yours. Having her move in while Rachel's away doesn't sit right with me. You know this could all blow up in your face." Rachel's breath caught. Her? Who was her? She stared at the screen. Then, with trembling hands, opened the messaging app. A string of voice notes, some from Jason, some from Lorraine. She pressed play on the first message from Jason. His voice was cheerful, almost giddy. "Mom, Svetlana is amazing. I'm in love. I want her here with me." Rachel turned down the Paris job, but I'm working on convincing her to change her mind. If I can push her to go, it'll be perfect. She'll think I'm encouraging her to grow in her career. She'll be grateful. Meanwhile, Svetlana moves in, and I get to live the life I want. Easy. Rachel dropped into a kitchen chair, her hands like ice. The next voice note was from Lorraine. "You know how I feel about that wife of yours. But listen to me. If Rachel finds out you moved another woman into the apartment while she's away, you're finished. You'll lose everything. Don't forget, your disability status? That's because of me. You're not actually disabled, and if they investigate, you're screwed." Jason responded. "Mom, calm down. The neighbors won't say anything. It'll be just us in the apartment, and Rachel will be busy living her best life in France, sending money home. We win. I mean, come on, me and Svetlana? It's like fate." He laughed. Rachel sat still, paralyzed. One more message played. "You're an idiot," Lorraine snapped. "You think you can hide this forever? You really think she won't find out? If she does, and this goes to court, you're on your own. And forget about your disability status. I can't promise anything." Jason replied again, his tone smug. "So what? Let her find out. I'll sue her for half the apartment. And maybe alimony, too. I'm legally disabled, right? Let her work harder. Let her pay for me and Svetlana." It was like listening to strangers, monsters wearing familiar faces. The man she'd sacrificed everything for, lying next to a woman named Svetlana, plotting to get rid of her, milk her for cash, take her home, take her life. Rachel stood up slowly, her whole body trembling. Her entire marriage, her entire life, was a lie. She walked out of the kitchen, grabbed her phone, and scrolled down to Mr. Thompson's number. Her fingers shook as she hit call. He picked up immediately. "Rachel? Everything all right?" She drew in a shaky breath. "I've changed my mind," she whispered. "I'm going to Paris." There was a pause, then a calm voice on the line. "I'm glad to hear that. We'll start the paperwork first thing tomorrow." Rachel ended the call and exhaled. Something inside her shifted. She was done sacrificing herself. France felt like another planet. A beautiful, electric, overwhelming planet. Rachel landed in Paris with Emily just a few weeks after making the hardest decision of her life. The cosmetic company arranged everything. The apartment near the Seine, the school at the U.S. Embassy for Emily, even a translator for her first week on site. She had expected stress, maybe even regret, but instead, she found something else. Relief. She didn't have to worry if Jason had eaten, if he'd taken his medication, if he was spiraling deeper into his self-made pit. She didn't have to plan dinners or send money or explain where she was every hour of the day. For the first time in years, she could breathe. And then there was Victor. Mr. Thompson had traveled to Paris a few weeks after she arrived to oversee part of the training and help bridge communications between the international teams. They went for coffee once, then dinner, then long walks through moonlit streets. He was calm, reliable, the kind of man who didn't make her feel like she owed him anything. The kind of man who listened. In his eyes, Rachel saw herself not as a workhorse or a caretaker, but as a woman. They didn't rush anything. Victor was gentle, giving her space, understanding that her wounds were fresh. But one evening, after they watched Emily sing at a small school concert, he turned to her under the soft lights of a Parisian cafe and said, "I think you deserve something good. Something real." 2 months later, he proposed. Rachel didn't answer right away. She needed time. Not because she doubted him, but because she was still closing a chapter that had nearly broken her. Jason. She filed for divorce through a lawyer in the States. Predictably, Jason fought back, claiming he was disabled, had nowhere to live, and deserved half the apartment. His confidence cracked only when her attorney calmly reminded him that a court case would involve a full investigation into his disability status. Rachel's lawyer had already begun gathering evidence. Testimonies from neighbors who saw Jason carrying heavy bags, security footage of him walking without assistance, receipts from his solo grocery trips. And then, the messages. Lorraine realized the gravity of the situation before Jason did. "You better sign that paperwork," she told him in a voice like cold steel. "Or we'll both end up behind bars. I got you those medical records. You think I want investigators digging into that now?" Jason signed. The court ruled in Rachel's favor. Her lawyer showed the judge that Rachel had paid the entire mortgage by herself for years. Jason's claim to half the property came with a catch. He was required to pay his share of the remaining debt. When the apartment was sold, nearly all of Jason's half went toward that. Rachel returned to France. Jason stayed behind, with nothing. He didn't understand how it had happened. One moment, he had a wife who made sure the lights stayed on, food appeared on the table, and bills were paid on time. The next, he was standing outside Lorraine's apartment with a single suitcase, listening to her footsteps retreat into the hallway as she wordlessly left him in the entryway. "I have nowhere to go," he muttered, stepping inside. "Not my problem," Lorraine snapped, flipping on the television. "You're my mother. I thought you'd help. I already did. And you ruined it." Her voice was flat, almost unfamiliar. Jason collapsed onto the couch, hands in his hair. Once, he'd been her golden boy, her pride, her legacy. Now he was dead weight. A grown man without a job, without a future. He tried working construction, lifting and hammering and sweating until his back screamed and his legs buckled. But now the pain was real. And this time, there were no more shortcuts, no sympathetic doctors. He limped home each night to Lorraine's cold apartment. She never saved him dinner. They barely spoke. Meanwhile, halfway across the world, Rachel was learning how to live. Paris became home in the truest sense. The job was inspiring. Her team respected her. Emily thrived at school, learning French faster than Rachel could keep up. And Victor was a steady hand on her back when she wavered, a kind smile after long days, a voice that never tried to control her, only support her. He didn't need saving. He didn't drain her spirit. He helped refill it. Some nights, they walked hand in hand along the river, sipping hot chocolate from corner cafes. Rachel used to think love was work, endless labor, sacrifice, compromise. Now, she was learning it could be warmth, laughter, quiet companionship. She didn't believe in miracles. Not really. But looking at Victor, at Emily's joyful face, at her new life, maybe, just maybe, she'd found one. Back in Ohio, Jason was unraveling. His plan had failed. He was supposed to live comfortably on Rachel's dime, coasting through life without lifting a finger. He thought he could manipulate her into leaving, get her out of the picture, and enjoy the benefits of her hard work. But now he was broke, jobless, and living with a mother who barely looked at him. Lorraine no longer covered for him. If anything, she seemed ashamed. She stopped defending him, stopped arguing with anyone who questioned his disability. Sometimes Jason caught her on the phone, whispering bitterly to an old friend, "I don't know what happened to him. He used to have drive. Now he's just waiting for life to fix itself." Jason tried to act like it didn't hurt. But every evening, when he returned to her apartment after a long day on a construction site, soaked in sweat and pain, he felt the gnawing emptiness inside him grow. The back pain that had once been an excuse was now very real. Every time he bent down or climbed scaffolding, a sharp, unrelenting pain shot through his spine. There were no more fake prescriptions, no more exaggerations. He had become exactly what he had pretended to be. Meanwhile, Rachel bloomed. Her mornings began with fresh croissants and coffee in a small kitchen filled with sunlight. Emily woke up easily, speaking more French every day, telling stories about her friends and school projects. Rachel walked her to school through cobbled streets, kissed her on the cheek, and then headed to work at the Paris headquarters of the cosmetics company. Her job was no longer just a job. It was passion. She led product development for an entire line of eco-conscious skincare, collaborating with French chemists and international designers. Her ideas weren't just heard, they were celebrated. Victor never pressured her about their engagement. He gave her space to decide when she was ready. Some evenings, he'd invite Rachel and Emily for dinner in his apartment, cook something classic but simple, and let the night unfold without expectations. There was peace in the way he moved through life, measured, patient, sure. Rachel realized that what she had thought was normal in her marriage with Jason had been survival. This was different. This was safety. And yet, despite the newness of her surroundings, the beauty of the city, the calm of her relationship with Victor, Rachel still sometimes found herself lying awake at night, haunted by echoes of the past. She'd think about the years she spent trying to fix Jason, about the birthday dinners she cooked while he lay on the couch, about the time she spent defending him to his mother, to their friends, even to herself. She had confused obligation with love, pity with compassion. But not anymore. A few weeks later, she received a message from her lawyer. The divorce was finalized. No appeals, no delays. It was done. Rachel closed the email and stared at her laptop for a long time. Then, slowly, she reached across the table and held Victor's hand. "It's over," she whispered. Victor squeezed gently. "Then maybe now it's time to begin." The months following the finalized divorce brought Rachel a strange kind of lightness, one she hadn't known she was missing. She finally felt free, not just from Jason's presence, but from the weight of years she had carried alone, his needs, his moods, his failures. She was no longer walking on eggshells, no longer shrinking herself to fit someone else's idea of how a woman should behave. For the first time in her adult life, Rachel belonged to herself. In Paris, the seasons changed. The spring rains gave way to warm, golden evenings, and she and Emily developed a new rhythm. Weekends were filled with museums and riverside picnics. Emily took up watercolor painting. Rachel tried yoga at a studio near the Seine. Their apartment, once temporary, now felt like home. Victor remained patient and kind. He gave Emily a book of fables in French and English, which she read aloud to him over dinner. Rachel watched them sometimes with a quiet gratitude that choked her. One afternoon, as she was reorganizing old files on her laptop, Rachel came across a folder labeled Dreams. Inside were sketches and notes for a product line she had imagined years ago, a wellness brand for women over 40. Herbal face creams, gentle cleansers, calming oils. She had written, "For the women who carry everything." Her fingers trembled slightly as she scrolled through the documents. She had forgotten this part of herself, the dreamer, the creator, the woman who wanted to build something just for her. Later that night, she brought it up to Victor. "I had this idea once," she said, showing him the folder. "Before everything. I don't know if it's good, but—" He didn't interrupt, just studied the designs, the handwritten notes, the early branding ideas. "You should do it," he said simply. Rachel laughed nervously. "It's not that easy. I'd need funding, a team. And now you have a career, experience, and freedom," Victor said gently. "That's all the permission you need." Those words stayed with her. Within weeks, she pitched the idea to a few colleagues. To her surprise, they were enthusiastic. One of them connected her to a Paris-based incubator for women entrepreneurs. Rachel presented her concept to a panel and was accepted into the program. She threw herself into the work with a fire she hadn't felt in years. Branding, formulas, marketing, sourcing ethical suppliers. She called the line Embrace. It felt symbolic. A way to embrace herself again. Her age, her past, her strength. Back in Ohio, Jason's life continued to unravel. He had been forced to take a job at a local construction supply store. The work was demeaning, exhausting, and far from the vision of the life he once thought he deserved. Lorraine didn't cook for him anymore. She left notes instead, microwaves on the counter. You know how to use it. They barely spoke. The apartment was cramped, stuffy, and always smelled like old carpet and regret. One night, drunk on cheap vodka, Jason found himself scrolling through Rachel's old Instagram account. It had been inactive for months. She'd started fresh after the divorce, but he still found a few public posts from years ago. A photo of a birthday cake she'd made for him. A picture of Emily in the park. His chest tightened. He tried to tell himself it was all her fault, that she'd abandoned him, that she never really cared. But deep down, something in him cracked. He had lost everything, and he knew it. Meanwhile, Rachel stood in her small Paris office, holding the first packaged bottle of Embrace in her hand. It was sleek, minimalist, elegant. She smiled, not because it was perfect, but because it was real. It existed. She existed. She was no longer surviving. She was living, and there was no going back. By the time summer settled in over Paris, Rachel's brand Embrace had become more than just a passion project. It was turning into a phenomenon. The first batches of products sold out online within days. Women from all over Europe, and even a few from the US, were posting glowing reviews on social media. They praised not just the formulas, but the message behind the brand. Rachel had built something that resonated, skincare made for real women with real lives. She was invited to speak at a Women in Business conference in Marseille, where she stood on stage and talked, hands slightly shaking at first, about what it meant to rebuild a life after betrayal, to find identity beyond being someone's wife, to dare to dream again at 40. The applause when she finished left her stunned and inspired. After the conference, a publisher reached out. Would she consider writing a book about her story? Rachel wasn't sure. The idea of laying her life bare, of recounting the shame, the silence, the slow-motion heartbreak, made her hesitate. But Victor encouraged her. Tell your truth, he said. You don't owe anyone perfection, but you might give someone else the strength to start again. So she began writing. At first, it was difficult. Revisiting the years with Jason, the slow unraveling, the erosion of her confidence. She cried more than once at her laptop. But then something shifted. The pain became clarity. The memories that once held her hostage now became pieces of a map, one that showed how far she had come. Meanwhile, Emily was thriving. She spoke French fluently now, made friends easily, and even started tutoring other American kids who were new to the city. Rachel watched her daughter bloom with pride, and sometimes guilt. She wondered if Emily missed Jason. But her daughter rarely asked about him. The occasional mention was always practical. Do I need to call Dad for the school form? Or did he send the money for that trip? Jason had, under court order, been made to send minimal child support after the divorce, and Rachel never brought him up unless necessary. One day, as they were walking home from the park, Emily looked up at her. Mom, she said carefully, you're really happy now, aren't you? Rachel paused. She hadn't expected the question. It felt simple on the surface, but it carried all the weight of what they'd lived through. I am, she said honestly. It took a long time. But yes, I am. Emily nodded. I think I like this version of you better. Rachel laughed. I think I do too. Back in Ohio, Jason's health had declined. His back pain had worsened, and without the motivation to push through or money for proper care, he was falling apart. His mother Lorraine had reached the end of her patience. She now left him to fend for himself, making it clear that his presence was a burden, not a comfort. He had applied to dozens of jobs, but was turned away each time, either for lack of qualifications or bad attitude. He began frequenting a nearby bar, wasting what little money he had on drinks and bitterness. One evening, as he sat hunched over a beer, he overheard two women talking about a skincare line. It's called Embrace, one of them said. created by a woman who started over after a divorce. She's in Paris now. Total boss story. Jason blinked. He turned slowly toward the women. Rachel, he muttered, before finishing his drink in one long gulp. It was all true. She'd done it. She'd made it without him. As autumn leaves began to scatter across the cobblestone streets of Paris, Rachel sat in a cafe near her office, stirring a cappuccino that had long since gone cold. Across from her sat her editor, a sharp-eyed woman named Camille, who tapped her pen against a printout of Rachel's manuscript. "I think this chapter," Camille said, pointing at a paragraph Rachel had written late one night about discovering Jason's betrayal, "is the most powerful. It's honest. Raw. You don't make excuses for him. Or for yourself." Rachel nodded slowly, tracing a fingertip along the coffee cup's rim. "I just never imagined I'd tell the world about it. About all of it." Camille leaned in. "You didn't just survive. You transformed. That's what makes your story worth telling." Rachel looked out the window. Paris was moving as always. Children in scarves, cyclists weaving through traffic, couples sharing sidewalk kisses. She felt both part of the world and separate from it, suspended between the life she used to have and the one she was still getting used to. After Camille left, Rachel walked to Emily's school. The sky had turned a soft violet, the kind that made the Eiffel Tower in the distance look almost magical. She spotted her daughter waiting near the entrance, talking animatedly with a classmate. As they walked home, Emily skipped ahead a few steps, humming a song under her breath. Rachel smiled. At home, there was a package waiting, another restock of Embrace. They were expanding into boutique stores across Europe now, and 2 new team members had just been hired. There were meetings scheduled with potential investors, and her book was nearly ready for publication. It should have felt like a dream. But sometimes, late at night, she still wrestled with doubt, with guilt, with that small voice that asked, "Was I too cold? Too selfish? Should I have stayed longer? Tried harder?" Then she'd remember the message. The one she'd received from Lorraine, Jason's mother, a few weeks earlier. It had been short and bitter. "Hope you're happy now. He's broke and sick. Maybe you can send money, since you left him to rot." Rachel hadn't replied. What was there to say? Lorraine had known the truth all along, had helped Jason deceive her. The nerve to guilt her now, after everything, was almost laughable, but it still stung. Victor had seen her expression after she read it and gently taken her phone. "You owe them nothing," he'd said firmly. "Not your energy, not your money, not even your anger." She wanted to believe that. The next day, she received a letter at her office. No return address. Inside was a sheet of lined notebook paper, filled with shaky handwriting. It was from Jason. "Rachel, I don't expect you to forgive me. I'm not even sure I forgive myself. But I saw the photos of you and Emily at that event in Lyon. She looked so happy. You both did. I guess I didn't realize what I'd thrown away until it was gone. Not just the marriage, but the respect, the trust. You gave me everything. And I took and took. I'm sorry. For lying. For manipulating. For not being the man I should have been. I don't expect anything from this. I just wanted you to know I see it now. I hope you're truly happy. I really do." There was no signature. Just a folded page. Rachel sat with it for a long time. She didn't cry. She didn't crumble. She simply felt peaceful. There was nothing more to fight about. No more explanations needed. The past couldn't be rewritten, but it didn't need to define her anymore. That night, she stood on the balcony of their Paris apartment as the lights of the city flickered on. Emily was asleep. Victor was in the kitchen, humming as he made tea. Rachel held the letter one last time, then fed it gently into a small metal bin. She lit a match and watched it burn. Thanksgiving was approaching, and while most Americans in Paris gathered in small expat circles to recreate a piece of home, Rachel wasn't in the mood for turkey or forced gratitude. Still, Emily's school was organizing a celebration, and Rachel knew it mattered to her daughter. She found herself baking a pumpkin pie the night before, covered in flour and warm memories. Emily stood on a step-stool next to her, holding a wooden spoon with far too much enthusiasm. "Do you think Daddy would have liked this pie?" she asked innocently. Rachel's hand froze mid-motion. The knife she held hovered over a heap of pecans. She forced a small smile. "Maybe, but you know what? I think you're going to love it even more." Emily beamed, satisfied. Later that night, once Emily was asleep, Rachel stood by the sink, washing dishes under the soft hum of the kitchen light. Victor walked in, towel slung over his shoulder, holding 2 mugs of chamomile tea. "You're quieter than usual," he said. She shrugged. "I'm just reflecting, I guess. Holidays always do that." Victor placed the mugs on the counter and leaned beside her. "Want to talk about it?" Rachel hesitated. "Emily asked about Jason today. About the pie." Victor didn't say anything right away. He knew the minefield that topic could become. "She still remembers some things," Rachel continued. "Mostly small, harmless ones. Like when he used to take her to the park, or how he'd carry her on his shoulders. I don't know whether to correct those memories or let her keep them." Victor placed a gentle hand on her back. "She's allowed to remember him as her dad. That doesn't mean you're invalidating the pain or the truth. It just means you're letting her hold on to what little good she knew." Rachel nodded slowly. "I never thought co-parenting would look like this. One parent completely gone, the other unsure whether to mourn the man or be angry he's still alive." Victor chuckled softly. "That sounds like something you'd write in your book." She smirked. "You're not wrong." When Thanksgiving morning arrived, Rachel helped Emily dress in a yellow jumper and a sunflower headband. They took the metro to the international school, where tables were filled with cranberry sauce, sweet potatoes, and small paper turkeys made by the kids. Rachel chatted politely with other parents, but remained on the edge of every conversation. When Emily ran off to join her friends, Rachel took a step outside. The school's courtyard overlooked a row of rooftops bathed in golden light. She breathed in the crisp autumn air. "Excuse me," came a voice behind her. She turned to find a woman in a burgundy coat, smiling warmly. "You're Emily's mother, right? I'm Sophia. My daughter Isla is in the same class." Rachel extended her hand. "Nice to meet you." They exchanged pleasantries, but soon found themselves laughing. Sophia was witty, an art gallery owner from New York who had moved to Paris after a sudden divorce. Her story was different, but familiar in its shape. "Funny how we come here thinking we're escaping something," Sophia said, sipping a paper cup of cider. "And instead we end up rebuilding." Rachel smiled. "Sometimes you have to break everything before you can see what's worth saving." Sophia's eyes sparkled. "Exactly." That afternoon, when Rachel and Emily returned home, there was a message from Camille. The final draft of Rachel's memoir had been approved for publication. The release date was set. A small tour across Europe was being planned. They were negotiating rights for an English-language release in the U.S. Rachel sat on the couch, stunned. "Is something wrong?" Emily asked, watching her mother with concern. "No," Rachel whispered. Then, louder, "No, honey. Everything's just changing. In a good way." Emily hugged her. "You're the best mom ever." Rachel held her close, feeling the truth of those words settle into her bones. Maybe she had lost a lot. Maybe her past was fractured. But in this moment, in a warm apartment in a new country, holding the child she'd built a future for, Rachel knew she hadn't just survived. She had grown. The Paris winter crept in slowly, never harsh, but persistent. The wind cut through Rachel's coat as she crossed Pont Alexander III, the bridge lined with golden statues and old-world lanterns. She was on her way to meet Victor, who'd suggested they have dinner to celebrate the official confirmation of her book deal. They'd become something closer than friends over the past few months. Not lovers, not quite. But Rachel had begun to trust him in the quiet way that only comes after loss. He didn't try to fill space with promises. He simply showed up, consistently, kindly. The bistro he chose was tucked away on a cobbled street in the 7th arrondissement, with candlelit tables and handwritten menus. Rachel slid into her seat, cheeks flushed from the wind, eyes sparkling with anticipation. "Still doesn't feel real," she said after they ordered. "It's been months, and I still think someone's going to call and tell me there's been a mistake." Victor chuckled, sipping his wine. "You're one of the most capable people I know. The world's just finally catching up." Rachel looked at him, her smile soft. "Thank you. Really." Dinner passed in laughter, in quiet glances, in the sort of comfort that didn't demand anything in return. As they stepped outside afterward, Victor offered his arm. Rachel took it without hesitation. They walked in silence for a while, through streets glowing with holiday lights. "I'm scared," she admitted suddenly. Victor glanced at her. "Of what?" "Of wanting more. Of thinking this peace might actually be real." He didn't respond right away. Then, quietly, "It is real. You made it real." Later that night, back in her apartment, Rachel sat on the floor with Emily, building a puzzle together. The little girl was humming a Christmas tune, blissfully unaware of the storm that had once ravaged their lives. She was happy. That was all that mattered. Rachel received an email just before bedtime. It was from a lawyer in the States. Jason was formally contesting the divorce settlement. He wanted partial rights to the apartment back home, a claim that had no legal standing, but he was pushing anyway. Her stomach tightened. For a moment, it felt like the air had left the room. Victor called within minutes, as if sensing the shift. "I'm here," he said simply when she answered. "Whatever it is, you're not handling it alone." Rachel stared at the email again. The man who had drained her, abandoned her, manipulated her, was still trying to control pieces of her future. But this time, she wasn't the same woman. "Let him try," she said into the phone. "I'm not afraid of him anymore." The next few weeks were a blur of meetings, school events, and preparations for the book release. Camille was ecstatic. She'd arranged for Rachel to appear in interviews and podcasts, mostly with English-speaking outlets in Paris and London. The theme was always the same: transformation, resilience, starting over. Rachel answered every question with honesty. Not bitterness, not revenge, just truth. When one host asked her what gave her the strength to leave, Rachel smiled gently and said, "One day I realized I was disappearing, and I knew I had to come back to myself, for my daughter, and for me." The podcast went viral. Thousands of messages flooded in, mostly from women. Women who had stayed too long. Women who had left too late. Women who hadn't yet made a move, but were now considering it. Rachel read every word. And for the first time, she didn't feel alone. Spring came to Paris gently, like a shy visitor knocking on the window. Rachel stood on her balcony, watching as the chestnut trees in the square below began to bloom. The light was softer, the mornings warmer. Life was waking up again. Emily was now fluent in French, chatting easily with her friends and helping Rachel order groceries at the market. Every day after school, she would run to her mother with something new: a word, a drawing, a funny story. Rachel had never seen her so alive. Victor visited often, but he never imposed. He always asked first. He'd become Emily's unofficial French tutor and a patient friend to Rachel. One night, after they'd watched a movie on her small couch, Rachel turned to him. "Do you think people like us, people with this much baggage, can really start over?" Victor looked at her for a long moment. "It's not about starting over. It's about choosing what to carry with you and what to leave behind." Rachel thought about that for days. Meanwhile, back in the States, Jason's efforts to claim part of the apartment had hit a wall. Her lawyer, thorough and firm, had presented every receipt, every mortgage payment Rachel had made on her own for years. The court sided with her completely. But Jason's desperation didn't end there. One evening, Rachel received a call from a mutual friend. Jason had lost his job. His mother, who had always enabled him, had reportedly kicked him out after an argument. He was now working construction to get by, living in a rented room outside Pittsburgh. Rachel felt nothing. Not hatred, not triumph. Just the quiet acknowledgement of a man reaping what he had sown. She turned off her phone and looked around her cozy apartment. Emily was giggling in the kitchen, trying to make chocolate mousse from a French kid's recipe. The smell of melted cocoa filled the air. Rachel got up and joined her, grabbing a whisk and laughing as the mixture splattered. That weekend, Victor invited them both to a small village outside the city. "Just a day trip," he said. "There's a festival, music, food, and no cell signal." It was perfect. Emily danced in the town square with other children while Rachel wandered the cobbled streets, hand in hand with Victor. At one point, he turned to her, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You do realize you've built a whole new life here, right?" Rachel nodded. "I'm beginning to believe it." That night, on the train ride home, Emily fell asleep in her lap. The world outside the window was dark, but Rachel no longer felt lost. She had faced the storm, and she had come through it not only whole, but stronger. Her book launched 2 weeks later. The title, After the Fall, Finding Myself Again. It wasn't just her story. It was the story of thousands of women who messaged her. The story of survival, of reinvention, of refusing to disappear. Rachel stood at the front of a small bookshop in Montmartre during her first signing. People lined up, strangers, expats, locals. A woman in her 50s leaned close and whispered, "Thank you. Your words helped me leave after 23 years." Rachel blinked back tears. "Then we both made it," she whispered. Later that night, as she stood on her balcony again, the Eiffel Tower glowing in the distance. Victor joined her with 2 glasses of wine. "To you," he said, raising his glass. "To all the women who chose themselves."